Okay, this first sequence of videos is going to talk about what philosophy is. Now, I should say that there's many different conceptions of what philosophy is. It's a bit hyperbolic to say there is as many as conceptions of philosophy as there are philosophers. Certainly, many of my colleagues and I share very similar views of what philosophy is, although not all of us do. Some of us have strong disagreements with one another about what it is that what exactly philosophy is. So we won't attempt to sort of survey what everybody thinks, that is to give you a complete list of all the different views of what philosophy is, but instead I'll just describe a few different approaches, a few different views. So you might think of philosophy as a particular topic or set of topics. You might think of philosophy as that which does a particular job or some set of jobs. Or you might think of philosophy as a particular method, a particular way of doing things, or a set of methods. So when we're talking about what philosophy is, those are sort of the different views we're going to explore. After we do that, we're going to do a little further introduction by talking a little bit about logic. This isn't a course in logic, so we're not going to talk in detail about logic, but we need to say a little so we have a way of talking that's useful. And then we'll do some basic introduction of terms that are important for thinking through the issues that we'll discuss. Okay, so first up, suppose we think of philosophy as a particular topic or set of topics. What would be in that set? Now, I want you to notice that you can do the same thing with science, right? You can think of science as a particular topic or set of topics. Presumably no single topic, but there you could think of science as a set of topics. Like somebody says, what's science? You could say, well, science is biology and chemistry and physics. Maybe you're a little more expansive and you want to say, and it's sociology and psychology and so on and so forth. But either way, there's some kind of finite set of topics, and you say philosophy is the things in that set. Or sorry, science is the things in that set. Well, you can do the same thing for philosophy. So what would the topics be? Well, a complete list of topics that people think of as philosophical topics would be quite long. We're going to sort of look at four very broad categories into which most of that long list would fit. So here they are, and these are the topics that we'll cover in this class: epistemology, ethics, politics or political philosophy, and metaphysics. So what's epistemology? Well, episteme is the Greek root and has to do with knowledge. So you can think, and ology just means to give an account. So like biology is an account of bio or life. Sociology as account of society, and so on and so forth. Epistemology you can think of as like an account of knowledge. But the term has become to be used more broadly to talk about a variety of things that are related to knowledge, including belief, reasons, evidence, and the like. So when we're talking about epistemology, we might ask, what is rational cognition? So what is it for cognition or thinking to be rational? So let's look at a little discussion here. We have a doctor and we have a patient, and the doctor says to the patient, you are infected by a virus. Now, I should mention I made these slides years ago before viruses were on everyone's mind, but they're particularly appropriate now. So the doctor says to the patient, you are infected by a virus, and the patient says, okay, what should I do? Now, something I want you to notice here is the doctor says you should take these 3 pills a day. Something I want you to notice here is this. The doctor initially makes a claim about what is the case. You can think of this as a descriptive claim. The doctor just describes the world. The doctor says, here's a description of the world. You, Maroon, have a virus. But then the doctor next makes a claim about what should be the case, what ought to be the case. So the doctor says you should take 3 of these pills a day. Notice that this is not a descriptive claim. The doctor is not saying you are going to take these 3 pills a day, right? The patient can't sort of go away and come back and say, aha, what you said was false when you said I should take these 3 pills a day because I didn't do it, right? That doesn't make any sense. Showing that you didn't take the pills doesn't show that it's false that you should. It just shows that you didn't do what you should have done. These are fundamentally different kinds of claims. Claims about what is the case, descriptive claims, and claims about what should be the case, prescriptive claims. That's why this is called a prescription. So this is description versus prescription. Description describes the world. Prescription says how the world should be. You can think of this as sometimes described as the is versus ought distinction. Description tells you how things are, what is the case. Prescription tells you how things ought to be. Prescription, ought, this is what's sometimes called norms. Now, it doesn't have anything to do with the word normal. Well, it's related to the word normal, but it's not saying this is normal in some way. It's saying when we talk about norms, we're talking about just about what should be the case. Now, when we ask about rational cognition, we're not asking what is thinking. We're not asking for an account of what thinking is. Maybe psychology would give you that. We're asking for an account of what is rational thinking. We're not asking about how people do think. We're asking about how they should think. That's what the rational is, asking people about how people should think. So one thing epistemology can do is say, here's how people should think. You might similarly ask this: what norms govern thinking? That is, what are the rules or guidelines that you should follow when you're thinking? You might also ask, what is knowledge? So is knowledge the kind of thing that can be had only by perception, by seeing the world, feeling the world, smelling the world, tasting the world, hearing the world, and so on? Or is knowledge the kind of thing that can be had merely by thinking, by sort of reflecting on, for example, the nature of number? You might ask in this vein, when you're related to the questions I just asked, how do we acquire knowledge? Do we acquire knowledge through perception? Does seeing tell us about the world? Does hearing, and so on and so forth? Are there other ways of acquiring knowledge? For example, does mathematical inference provide knowledge? Does logical inference provide knowledge? How about intuition? How about faith? Are these ways to know about the world or not? Those are all questions that you might ask under the topic of epistemology, and that's certainly and has long been a central branch of philosophy. Another branch of philosophy that's related in an important way, which we'll discuss later, is ethics. And ethicists ask questions along the following lines. I'm just using ethics to stand for moral philosophy. Sometimes people draw a distinction between moral philosophy and ethics. We're not doing that here. So where do moral norms come from? What makes an action right? Suppose some action is right and some other action is wrong. Like maybe it's right for me to give you the grade that you earn and wrong for me to fail you just because I would find it amusing. You can say, okay, that is right. It is right for me to give you the grade you earn and wrong for me to fail you for no good reason. But what makes it right and wrong, right? What makes the right action right and the wrong action wrong? Where do these moral norms come from? You might ask, which moral norms are the right ones? So would it be wrong for me to fail you just for fun? Is it appropriate for me to give you the grade that you earn, or should I just give everyone an A because that will make you happy? There's all sorts of possibilities. So this question here, which moral norms are the right ones, is asking you to sort of catalog, take any given action and say it belongs in the category good or belongs in the category bad. Or maybe to put it on a continuum, describe how good it is or how bad it is. This one here is not asking you to categorize actions as good and bad. It's asking you this: once you've categorized them as good and bad, what makes it true that they're good and bad? Where do the rightness and wrongness come from? Similar to the question, which moral norms are the right ones, you could ask which norms should govern action. You can also ask who or what deserves moral consideration. So right now I'm sitting at a desk. I'll knock on it. Does this desk deserve moral consideration? If I'm deciding, say, how to rearrange the room, do I need to take the interests of the desk into account, or only the interests of, say, my wife, who might have an opinion about how the room should be rearranged? You might think that only humans deserve moral consideration. You might think that only members of your tribe deserve moral consideration, or only people you like, or only people with whom you agree about this or that, or only people in your nation, or only people in your planet. You might think that moral norms extend further. So you might think, for example, some animals deserve moral consideration. So about 15 feet to my left is my sleeping puppy. And I think she deserves moral consideration. You might agree, you might not. You might say the only reason to take her interests into account is because I have some attitude towards her, so her worth comes from my attitude towards her. Or you might say, no, she has interests in and of itself, so even if nobody cares about her, it would be wrong to kick her. Those are two competing views about who or what deserves moral consideration. And that's the kind of question a moral philosopher might ask. Next up, politics. When you're doing political philosophy, you might ask, why should we have any government rather than none at all? So here we're not asking about what particular kind of government we should have. We're asking instead, why should there be any government? A government is always a coercive institution, right? Governments coerce. If I have no power over you, If there's a society in which no one has any power over anyone else, it's not really there's no real government. Government exists precisely when people can exercise authority. So why should anybody have the right to exercise authority over someone else? Why should we have any government rather than none at all? You can also ask what kind of government we should have. So supposing we should have some kind of government, what kind should it be? And here there's a variety of different dimensions along which you can assess society, or different ways you can ask this question. You might ask, what kind of economy should the government establish? Should there be mostly markets determining how resources are distributed, or should there be some centralized power who makes decisions about how resources are distributed? You can ask what kind of freedoms individuals should have. You can ask how members of the government are determined, whether they're elected or government offices inherited, or whether there's a lottery that puts people in government positions. You can ask about what the nature of those positions should be. Should there be a president, for example, or just a parliament, or just a, whatever. There's all sorts of different ways you can, there's all sorts of different aspects of government you can ask about. And we'll look at answers to the first question primarily, but a little bit the second. Finally, the fourth topic here is metaphysics. So what is metaphysics? Well, metaphysicians ask questions like this. What is real? So I'm looking at a computer right now, or so I say. Is that really true? Is there really a computer here? And there's a variety of ways you can explore that question. You might ask, for example, maybe, is the computer just, a dream? Am I just imagining it? That sounds more like a question in epistemology. But you can ask the question with a metaphysical bent as well. You can ask, are computers actually constituents of reality, or is it instead the case that only the fundamentals out of which the computer is composed constituents of reality? So I say there's a computer here. You might say, no, that's false. There's a swarm of elementary particles that you choose to call a computer, but computers aren't really constituents of reality. It's just the swarm of elementary particles that are real. Those are competing views about the nature of reality. You can hold that the computer is another way to sort of ask this question. You can say, is the computer built out of just ideas? Does it just exist in virtue of our perceiving in a certain way, or does it exist independently of us? You can ask, what grounds what? Here, this is a question of what's built out of what. So you can ask, for example, is my mind built out of my brain, or is my mind a distinct thing from my brain in the same way a car is a distinct thing from my brain? You can ask, what is a person? Is a person a collection of experiences? Is a person her memory? Is a person identical with her body? There's all sorts of possibilities here, and you can ask which of these is the right possibility. Okay, so those are 4 topics, and you can think of philosophy as being any of these 4 topics. And then there's an interesting question, what might unify them? So suppose you think of science as, biology, physics, chemistry, and economics. Throwing economics in there is kind of weird, given that I say biology, chemistry, and physics is the first 3. But you can think of science as sort of those 4. And then you might ask the question, well, why do those count as the topics of science when, say, we're leaving out sociology or whatever else? We can ask the same question if we think of philosophy as these 4 topics. We can ask, why these? What unifies them? What makes them all properly philosophical topics? And we'll stop here and answer that question next time, or at least I should say explore answers to that question next time.